All right, Bismillahi walhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum everyone, and peace be upon you. Everyone try to move up a little bit just so give people who come in later room in the back. Welcome, how's everyone doing? Good, assalamu alaikum. I see some new faces here today. Okay. So today's topic is on finding peace through the pain. And the reason why I chose this topic is because in the world we live in, pain is we're constantly being sent the message to avoid pain, to avoid discomfort, to, seek instant gratification, to only accept that which feels good, that which, doesn't agitate us in any way. So what happens for a lot of people is that when they feel pain, or when they feel discomfort in their life, they treat it as an intruder. It's like, you don't belong here. What are you doing in my life? And so they think that you're either in pain or in peace. Or you're either going through pain or you're going through times of ease and inner sakina and all of that, right? But the reality is if we don't understand the nature of our struggles and the nature of our path, every time we feel discomfort, or every time we feel anything other than feeling good, what's going to happen is we're going to pause, we're going to go into like resistance mode, we're going to panic, oh my God, I was doing great, I was feeling good, now I'm back to this again, I'm feeling pain again. Or I'm feeling like almost as if it doesn't have space in our lives. Almost like it doesn't belong here. It's like someone who comes into your home, right? If they don't belong there, what do you try to do? You shut them out. Keep them outside. You don't open the door. And so this is a big misconception. And so I want to start with this truth, which is pain and peace can exist right next to each other. Pain and peace are not mutually exclusive. Our life has the capacity for it to hold space for our joys right next to our pain. For our peace right next to our pain. But the key is how do we find peace through the pain? How do we experience peace through the pain? First, I want to give you some examples from the Quran of people, the greatest people to walk this earth, who modeled for us what tests and the hardest of tests, the hardest of struggles can exist right next to their tawakkul, right next to their peace, right next to their, sakina and acceptance and rida, right? Contentment. We have the example of Yaqub alayhi salam, Prophet Jacob, right? Who lost his son, experienced a great amount of grief. Not just because, if losing your son is not, if that's not enough grief, can you imagine if you know in the depth of your heart that it's at the hands of your other sons? Imagine that kind of pain that he went through, knowing not only that he lost his son and he doesn't know if his son is safe, he doesn't know where his son is, but he has this deep understanding that his other sons did something to their own brother. Imagine as a parent the kind of pain that Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam lived with for many, many years. Did he feel pain? Absolutely. Did he grieve? Absolutely. His grief was so strong and so deep and so hard that it led him to going blind from the tears of that grief, from that expression of that grief. But did he have trust in Allah? Absolutely. Did he attach his heart to Allah? Absolutely. In fact, even when he was criticized by his own sons for crying so much and for grieving so much, that judgment, what did he say? Ashku bathi wa huzni ila Allah, right? That I complain my suffering and my grief to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he also said this to them, I know from Allah what you do not know. What is that? It's that I'm going through pain. I am grieving. I'm not going to stop crying just because you guys are criticizing it. But you know what? I also know that this has meaning. I also know that I'm not going through this in vain. I know who Allah is. And I know from Allah what you do not know. He exemplified what it means for pain to sit right next to tawakkul, and inner strength and inner peace. He exemplified that beautifully. So when people come and say, you know, oh, that person is, you know, doesn't have iman because look at what they're emotionally struggling. Tell them, look at the Prophet of Yaqub. Prophet Yaqub, alayhi salam, right? Does he not have iman because he was emotionally struggling? Because he was grieving and crying so much because it was an emotional pain for him to lose his child? Of course he still had iman and he had faith. And so I say this because especially in the spiritual community, in the Muslim community, I see two things that happen, right? Either somebody is on one end and they're saying that like, they're judging themselves so harshly because they think that their pain and their emotional struggles must mean that it's a negative reflection of their iman. Or I see people judging other people or having this perception that if you have iman and you have faith and you're close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you're supposed to always be emotionally at peace. That you're not supposed to be feeling that much pain. But there was nobody tested more than the prophets, alayhim salam. Nobody experienced pain like they did. And there's hikmah, there's wisdom behind that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows you his most favorite people, the greatest of people to walk this earth, and then tests them in a way that he doesn't test anyone else. To show you that no, when you're tested, it doesn't mean Allah hates you. It doesn't mean Allah's abandoned you. مَا وَدَّعَكَ رَبُّكَ وَمَا قَلَى, right? In Surah Al-Duha. Your Lord has not abandoned you, nor does he hate you. We need to change this understanding, this association we make between iman and us and our emotional struggles. Oftentimes what people do also is they let their emotional struggles, let them speak for Allah. So if I'm going through this pain, it must mean that Allah's like punishing me. It must mean Allah is far from me. You know, it must mean I'm doing something wrong. But Allah is not dependent, and who Allah is not dependent on your emotions that are fleeting. You know, you can experience how many emotions in a day? Many. You think Allah, who is not bound by time and space, who is outside of his creation, you think that he is going to be affected by your emotional pain and struggle or dependent upon that? Allah doesn't change because of your emotional experience. Who Allah is to you does not change because of your emotional experience. Just as someone you love, right, wouldn't, of course this is a lesser because Allah is not comparable to a human, but you know, just as someone you love their love for you shouldn't change based on how you feel. So we need to stop defining our emotional struggles in relation to like as defining our iman, our faith and our spiritual experience, and defining even worse, you know, astaghfirullah, defining Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by our emotional struggles. And I always reference the poem by Rumi, who called The Guest House, when I talk about this, about holding space for all kinds of emotions even within your day. And to train ourselves to not look at pain as the intruder, like, what are you doing here? He says, each day is like a guest house. And in this day, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have it right in front of me, but it's a long poem, so I recommend you check it out. It's called The Guest House. You just Google Guest House Rumi. But basically the meaning of this poem is he says that, you know, every day is like a guest house, and every day you have visitors. In this day, this guest house, you sometimes get an agitation, you know, a sadness, a joy. He says, welcome them all, for they all have a message for you from the beyond. But what many people do in this world is they only welcome what? what feels good. They only welcome what feels good. And if something good happens, or if they feel good, then that means that Allah must be happy with them, or that I'm doing good iman-wise. But if I feel bad and I'm crumbling and I feel like I'm struggling and I keep falling, getting back up, oh, it must mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unhappy with me. It must mean that I'm far. What we want to cultivate, and this is how we find peace through the pain, is that we want to train our hearts to walk towards Allah in all its conditions. We want to train ourselves to walk towards Allah in all our conditions. We want to train ourselves to not make the pain or the joy our destination, where we stop, where we halt and say, this is the end. Emotions come and go. But this is training we need to go through. Through trial and error, you'll learn that every time you make an emotional pain, even joy, right? Difficult or easy emotions, every time you make them the destination, where you think like, this is my permanent place, I'm going to be here forever, and you don't make Allah the destination, you don't take those emotions to Him, your suffering, your pain becomes more. So one of the realities is that Allah was and is and always is the destination. Our emotions are not the destination. What you feel today or right now is not the destination. Your pain is not forever. Your pain is not the most permanent space, nor is your happiness, because this isn't Jannah. Right? And so that's the other thing, it goes both ways. It's not treating your pain as the permanent destination, but it's also not treating your happiness as the permanent destination. You know, early on in my journey, one of the things that I struggled with was understanding why every time I felt like the spiritual high or iman, that closeness, I would feel like I'm holding like a hot potato, right? I would always describe it like that, like I feel like I'm going to lose it because it feels so good, right? And you enjoy that sweetness of being close to Allah, that you don't want to lose that. But then I'd lose it. I don't feel the way I want my heart to feel. And for years, I had this one question: why is this happening? What is the meaning behind this? And of course, when I would ask teachers or scholars, they would say that, well, iman goes up and down, which is true. But it still wasn't, I feel like it didn't address what I was seeking. And I remember, this was like, subhanAllah, and I always tell you guys that Allah doesn't, when you ask and when you seek, Allah always, He chooses the right time and place to unveil you from a truth you're seeking. So it was my first time that I went to Umrah, and I remember my roommate, me and her, it was the last night of Medina, we decided to go and sit outside Masjid al-Nabawi. And for some reason, I decided to ask her this question. I said, you know, sometimes I feel like my iman is like, you know, every time I feel so close to Allah, I lose that spiritual high, that feeling. She said one statement to me, one sentence. She said, seek Allah, not the iman. And she wanted to elaborate, but she didn't need to. That was the timing of when my heart needed to receive that. She asked me, she's like, do you understand? I was like, you don't need to say any more. And it's because I was seeking what? The feeling. I was seeking the spiritual high, that feeling we always want. But we're not angels, number one. And this isn't Jannah. We're not going to always feel that spiritual high, that feel good, right? And there's actually, and so this was the beginning of me trying to divulge deeper into, or the continuation of me understanding, okay, well, what is the meaning behind this? What does it mean to seek Allah and not the spiritual high? And then I explored further, and I had other questions, which is, okay, then what is the meaning behind Allah not giving me that spiritual high? Because Allah doesn't withhold something unless it serves me. And through my own experiences, through trial and error, I learned a powerful truth, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His names, two of His names are what? He is Al-Basit and He is Al-Qabid. Al-Basit is the one who expands, the one who gives abundantly. But you know what? When we think of this name, we probably oftentimes think of external blessings, right? Like he gives me risk, you know, he gives me provisions, he gives me like wealth, right? Or money or children or something, right? People think of like those things. They think of when Allah gives abundantly, they think of it in outer forms. But no, Allah is al-Basit with our hearts as well. And he chooses to be al-Basit with our hearts by giving it abundantly as well. And there will be times when Allah is al-Basit with your heart. You'll find that your heart is expanded. You know, you feel the sweetness of Iman. You read Quran and you feel like your heart is just open. You're receiving it. You're close to Allah, and it shuts out any other concern. And you're like, oh, if only I could feel like this all the time. Right? But then there are times when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Qabid with your hearts. Al-Qabid, it comes from the word qabd, which means to constrict or withhold. So sometimes we also might think of this also in external blessings, right? Like we might think, oh, Allah is being al-Qabid with me. He's withholding right now. He's not answering my dua, or he's not, you know. No, but sometimes he's al-Qabid with our hearts. And this is when our heart feels constricted, not expanded. You read Quran, you do what you need to do, and then you walk away and you didn't feel that what you wanted to feel. You go to pray, you leave, it's not like the prayer of yesterday when Allah was al-Basit with your heart. And then you start to question, what did I do wrong? Is Allah mad at me? And I'm not saying it's wrong to question that, right? A little self-doubt doesn't hurt anyone. But it's when you make that the destination. When you start to say things, well, you know, what's the point of, I'm not going to pray the next prayer. I'm going to stop reading Quran because I'm not feeling it. That's when you have to really be careful. And so through this, Allah teaches us our truth. Because that's the purpose of tests. You know, in the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about tests, He says, in Surah Al-Ankabut, do people think that they will be left alone because they say we believe and will not be tested? And we indeed tested those who were before them, and Allah will certainly make it known the truth of those who are true, or those who are true in another translation, and will certainly make it known the falsehood of those who are liars. But in this ayah, who is Allah making the truth visible to? To Him? No, because Allah knows the truth of each of our hearts. But when we go through tests, and we go through pain in life, when we go through constrictions of the heart and we don't feel as motivated to go pray or to do those things, that is a test. Who is Allah showing the truth to? Us. He's showing us in that moment, who are you worshiping? Are you worshiping me? Or are you worshiping your nafs? Are you worshiping your feelings? And that's the thing. You know, as a psychologist, I can tell you that everyone has a God. And this is something known in psychology. We say that like God is everyone's highest value. And this is why in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the example of those who take their desires as their Lord, right? So everyone has that capacity to make something their Lord. And so many people, they worship their emotions. They worship their nafs. If I feel something, I'll do it. If I don't feel like doing it, I don't do it. If I want something, I go for it. If it's like whatever my desire, whatever my emotions tell me, I follow through. I obey. That obedience that should go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has become centered around my own emotions. So what is the hikmah behind the times when we don't feel that spiritual high, or that emotional nourishment? Is that Allah is showing you the sincerity of what you're seeking in those moments. Because imagine if you only worshipped Allah when you felt good, or when He gave you that spiritual high. So you go pray, you get a spiritual high, who benefits? You, right? And then you go back because you want that spiritual high, but then now Allah withholds it. And then you stop going. What were you seeking? You were seeking that feeling. So in those moments, so there's hikmah behind when Allah is al-basit with your heart. When Allah is al-basit with your heart and He expands your heart and you're getting so much nourishment and you feel so close to Him and you feel iman, those are the moments you roll up your sleeves and you do more. You take advantage of those moments. Because you know you're not guaranteed them. It's a gift. These spiritual highs, this closeness to Allah is a gift. And it's not guaranteed. And it's a sign to show you, okay, am I worshiping Allah or am I worshiping my feelings? But when Allah is al-qabid with your heart, there's also a blessing. You know, what do you think pleases a parent more? If they had, let me give you an example. Like if a parent has, let's say 2 children, right, in front of them, and one child, they gave a task to those 2 children. But for one child, they know this is easy for the child and it's so doable. They've done it before. They even may enjoy doing it. But for one child, they know it's so difficult. They even hate doing it. What do you think is going to make the parent happy? Like really happy. Like to see that child doing that action even though it's hard for them. Because they know it would please their parent. Right? Any parents here? No? Okay. So, you know, it's, you see this, you know, when you look at, you know, parents and the way they interact with their children, that the parent becomes so happy, oh my God, this was difficult for my child, but they did it anyway. Then in that moment, they know that child was seeking to what? Obey that parent, to please that parent, right? And to do what is right. And so when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, is al-qabid with our hearts and we don't feel that iman and we still go and worship Him anyway, He's looking at us saying, you know, this abd, this servant is sincerely worshiping me. That's where the sincerity of our actions come out. And it's for us to know. Allah already knows. Allah already knows what you were going to do. But in those moments, it's for us to know what we are seeking. And to treat the emotions and the spiritual high and all of these things as the means, not the end. That we train our hearts to walk towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all our conditions. If I feel joy, I take it to Allah. If I feel pain, I take it to Allah. What this does is that it minimizes the impact of that emotion upon you. Because there's such a hikmah behind just even having the akhirah too, like having knowledge of the akhirah, that this world is not your permanent destination. But when you make Allah the destination, you don't live, or your emotions do not define who you are. They are a means. Okay, you start interacting with them differently. You start asking different questions. But before, when you treat pain and difficult emotions or the lack of like that spiritual high as an intruder, what do you usually ask? Wait, what's happening? Why is this here? Why am I feeling pain? How can I get rid of this? But when you treat everything as, okay, if I get joy, I still try to take it to Allah. If I get pain, I take it to Allah. You treat emotions equally and you make Allah the destination, you start asking different questions. What is this teaching me? What is this emotion, difficult emotion, teaching me? About myself? About Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? About my test? What is it telling me I need? Sometimes when you feel a difficult emotion, it's communicating to you something that you're lacking, something that you need. Maybe you need connection. Maybe you need someone to listen. Maybe you need, some alone time. Maybe you need to go for a walk. Sometimes when we're constantly looking at pain or discomfort as like an intruder, we don't really get to figure out what we need. You know, when you're so busy resisting something, you don't welcome it and you don't learn from it. So instead, what people often do is what? Disconnect. Okay, well, I can't get rid of you. Let me disconnect from you. And what do people usually do? They go outside of themselves. Let me distract myself here. Let me do this. Let me do that. You know, retail therapy, right? All these things to get them to disconnect from their difficult emotions. because they've told themselves that there's no place for you here. There's only place for me to feel good. There's only a space in my life for me to feel good, for me to feel a spiritual high, for me to feel happy. And this is what the world is teaching us today, by the way. It's like, oh, if you're not happy at your job, quit it. You know, if you're not happy here, leave it. That person bothered you, cut them off. You know, it's like they're training people to disconnect. And this is what's happening, by the way, nowadays. So many people are isolated. So many people, you know, are disconnected from themselves. And so we need connection, but not just with others. We need connection with ourselves. We need to hold a space for ourselves to experience both pain and, you know, difficult emotions and happy emotions, just as you would hold a space for someone else to feel that way. You know, if someone only shows you that they're happy all the time, right? And you never they never let you in to see any of their discomfort, or you'd probably be like, okay, wait, you know, is our connection real? If you're in a relationship with someone, even a friendship, right? And all they show you is perfection, you're going to start like feeling like, wait, the connection here is not real. You know, usually a strong connection is rooted in the ability of two people to be able to show their true selves, the good times and the bad times, right? But we have to train ourselves to do the same with ourselves. You know, can we hold a space for both our pain and our difficult emotions and our happy, you know, feel good emotions to exist? And to not attribute, you know, so much, to not, first of all, attach it to your worth or define Allah by them. Like, oh, if I'm happy, it means Allah's pleased with me. If I'm upset, then it means Allah's mad. Or if I'm in pain, that means Allah's mad at me. You know, we talked last time about mindfulness and how to hold, like, to be a witness to your emotions without judgment. This is really powerful because many people, what they do is they automatically go in judging mode, right? Defining mode. Oh, this is what it means about me. I feel this way, so this means this. But being able to be present with your emotions, just as you would with someone else. When someone comes to you and says, hey, I feel this way, you're not going to say, oh, man, that means you have really bad iman. You're not going to do that, right? Or if they feel happy, you're not going to be like, oh, it really means Allah's happy with you right now. You know, like you just hold the space. You let them speak their emotions. You don't attribute meaning or judgment or definition to it, but you let them experience their emotion and you welcome it. And we need to do the same with ourselves. Otherwise, we won't get to learn from our pain and from our joy. We miss the opportunities to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through our experiences. And we give emotions a greater value in their life than they deserve. They're not designed to be the destination, just as our thoughts are not meant to be the destination, just as our emotions are not meant to be the destination. And so it makes things lighter. And it allows you to navigate things in a healthier way, because you're not meant to go through your emotions alone. You know, when they say, like, you know, when someone's going through a difficult time and they have the support of loved ones, isn't it easier to go through that than not having the support of loved ones? It's the same with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and much greater, of course, that when Allah tests you and you go through pain, He never designed it for you to go through it alone. But many people, when they go through pain, they isolate, just as they isolate from people, they make the mistake of isolating from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them the test to see Him and to see His help through it, and to see what He is trying to teach them through it. So when you understand this, you just start asking different questions. Instead of why me? No, what is Allah teaching me through this? What is Allah creating this, you know, this test, this process? Because it's when you're tested and when you go through pain, a process is being facilitated. Your molding is happening right now. You don't see it, but no, Allah is facilitating a process where you have to evaluate the pieces of your life, and you have to evaluate who you were and who you want to become. You have to evaluate. Who says it? But there's a quote that says, when you feel like you've been buried, you've been planted. And that's Allah's facilitating. So Allah has like this vision for you, but all you see is the pain. But if you don't see Him, you don't see the vision. And so it starts with us directing our heart. Last week we talked about the qalb. Its nature is to turn. So when we go through tests, how are we turning our heart to Allah? Even when you can't walk to Him, even when you have to crawl to Him, even when you feel so brokenhearted, you can't even utter the words, when you feel so much pain that you can't even find the words to communicate it to Allah, go to Him. Go to Him and be present with Him, and be present with the fact that He sees me, He hears me, He is more aware of my pain. Keep making Him the destination, and He will show you the vision He has for you through, and His plan for you throughout that test. And you might not experience it in the moment, but you have this trust that Allah is molding me to become who He wants me to be. Allah is creating a process for me to become more truthful, to become my best self, to become more authentic, to become somebody He is pleased with, to let go of all the layers that no longer serve me, to shed the things that I have been carrying that do not serve me, that have been weighing me down, to let go of habits that do not serve me, to maybe change the people I've been hanging around with that have not been serving me. People don't have reason to make changes in their life unless they are tested. This is the nature of the human being. They learn more in times of adversity. They make the most powerful changes in the times of adversity that they would have never made in times of ease. Who has reason to evaluate these difficult things when everything seems great and they feel great? Right? Have you ever seen someone so happy that they, their happiest time, sit and really like change so much in their life and start transforming and start really digging deep and feeling, they don't go seeking it because things are easy. And this is how we understand the statement of Allah tests those whom He loves, is when we understand this point. Because people, when they don't understand this, they'll say, well, if that's love, I don't want it. But it's when you have an understanding that when I am tested, it is in favor of me. It is in service of me. It is to give me, not to take from me. And that's the difference between you going through a test and feeling peace and feeling moments of growth. Not all the time. We're not guaranteed, remember. But we're not guaranteed to always feel a certain way. But the difference between going through a test and coming out of it with growth, and the difference between going through a test and coming out of it bitter, resentful, more angry, and with more suffering, is how you interpret and approach the test. Do you see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, planning in service of you or against you? Last week we talked about having a good opinion of Allah, right? That is one of the major, contributors to how we feel either more suffering or we feel we can do something with that pain that is positive for us. It's are you viewing Allah through the test? Do you view Allah as one who is planning in favor of you, in service of you, rooted in His love for you? Or do you see Him testing you as being against you? That he doesn't love me, He hates me. There's not a coincidence, or it's not, it's not, there's a reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, He gives us that ayah of ma wadda'aka rabbuka wa ma qala. That, your Lord has not forsaken you, nor does He hate you. Because Allah knows the human being. Allah knows His design, and He knows how we are when we are feeling pain, how vulnerable we feel, the shame that might come up, the guilt that might come up, the negative interpretations of ourselves that might come up. So a great way to feel peace through the pain is to not speak for Allah, but actually let Allah speak for Himself by going to the Quran, by letting Him speak to you with His words. Instead of you saying, oh Allah, this must be what Allah's doing, or this must be what, it's a great way to feel peace through the pain is to go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to let His word speak to you. And a great surah is Duha, Surah Duha. It's really beautiful because it really does speak to someone who's going through a lot of pain. And it came to the Prophet ﷺ in a time where he was going through a lot of pain. And it gives you hope. And it addresses these emotions of when you feel abandoned, when you feel like you're hated because you're going through pain. And it's not just a human being who's addressing it. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So takeaways from this lesson, and I'll go into Q&A, is that don't make your emotions a destination. They are the means, not the end. They are not what you worship. It is Allah who you worship. The spiritual high, the feel-good emotions, the happiness that you feel, they are not permanent destinations. Just as your negative emotions that you feel, or difficult emotions, they're not the destination. Make them the means. Train your heart. I feel good, let me go to Allah. I get good news, I talk to Allah. I take it to Allah. I get bad news, I go to Allah. Before I go to the people, just train your heart to make Allah the destination. I got something, I take it to Him. So with this intention that, Ya Allah, I'm taking my experiences to you and help me see them in the best way that serves me. This is easier said than done. It's hard, especially if you've been trained to view emotions as such, as your destination. It's going to be hard to do, but it has so much benefit for you. So I want to end with this, may Allah help us walk towards Him in all our conditions, inshallah. And I'll take questions.